Hello and welcome to Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Motta, and today is October 17th, 2025. Welcome to Felonious Friday, a special edition, as today we are going to be delving into episode 1 of The Devil in Disguise, the new Peacock series that just dropped yesterday. I frankly was a little surprised. I thought that they were going to piecemeal it out. I thought we were going to have to wait for 8 weeks to see the whole thing. They let us binge it. So I stayed up till way too late last night watching it. Allie fell asleep. As you can see, my much better half, my brilliant and beautiful co-host, is not with me. She had a prior family obligation that she had to attend to. So sadly, I'll be alone for this, and I will miss her. I hope she knows that, and I'm sure you guys will too. But at any rate, tonight, I'm excited about this. I've been excited about this. I was excited about it when I heard that it was coming out. I was also wary a little bit. I was a little bit nervous about it because, frankly, if you know or don't know, I'm sure if you are a longtime follower of our channel, you probably realize and know that my father represented John Wayne Gacy back in 1979, 1980 through his trial, and was one of his 2 trial attorneys. And I was 10 years old when my dad landed that case. So I was a young boy, and for the next 40 years, that case had a very strange effect on the fabric of my life in ways that I didn't really, I wasn't thinking about it daily, but in terms of just kind of the course that my life took, that case and my dad's representation of Gacy undeniably has had a massive impact in my life, culminating with me deciding to leave the practice of law after 23 years to take this huge chance to go ahead and start this podcast with the blessing and support of my incredible wife. You know, um, it was scary. I'll tell you that. It was a scary thing to do it. Not only because I, uh, was afraid to leave the practice of law, but I was also afraid to leave my wife running our practice alone because it's a huge burden on her. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to put together a podcast that was worthy of the first source material I had, which was the tapes that my father had gifted me when I was 21 years old, and to do him the justice that he deserves in terms of his legacy. And it's scary putting yourself out there. It's scary to do that. It's intimidating. You don't know if people are going to like your content. They don't, you don't know if they're going to enjoy the sound of my voice in terms of podcasts. You don't know if they're going to like my writing style, the way that I tell stories, if it's going to resonate. Like all those things are going through your head. So it was a very, very scary proposition. So when I decided to do it, and I went to my wife and I asked her if she was okay with it, and she, of course, without blinking, said yes. And I went for it, and it turned out to be one of the most fascinating, unbelievable experiences of my life. Putting that together with my partner, Darren Wood, my producer, as him and I put that entire series, which is 36 episodes, which is the definitive piece on Gacy. I will put my Gacy knowledge of the case, and I'm talking about all aspects of it, up against anyone on the planet. Um, it's one of those things where I had to dive into everything that my father would have in terms of prepping for the case. And it went beyond, because it wasn't just me reading documents. It was me going out and talking to all the old cops. It was me talking to, obviously, my father, uh, being able to interview Bill Kunkel, the lead prosecutor in the case. It's just I was so drawn into what I was doing that 15 months that it took us to do it flew by, because we were preparing each episode on the run. It was a podcast investigation that took time, that took place in real time. As we would interview, I would then write the scripts. We'd record it. If we had interviews, we'd do the interview that week. I'd then write the script. Darren was working on trying to clean the sound of the Gacy tapes, which were 40 years old and had been taped on a old-fashioned push-button recorder where my father had put the microphone towards him instead of his client. So it was challenging, and Darren spent hundreds of hours trying to clean those tapes. And at the end of it, I tell the story when I utter the last words of that podcast in the third part of episode 33, which was a tip of the hat to the number of victims of John Wayne Gacy. I started sobbing. It was just a very cathartic experience for me in a lot of different ways, in ways that I didn't realize it was going to impact me the way that it did. So, all that to say that I was anxious for this to come out. And before we dive into it, my dear friend Tony Bruschi, who I love, who is a gentleman at all times, who has never been anything other than supportive of Allison and I and our show, and I don't care at all if we disagree about cases. Period. I don't judge people by whether or not we agree on whether or not somebody's guilty in a criminal case that has nothing to do with us. And neither should any of you. I judge people on the content of their character, and he's a fabulous human being. At any rate, last week he gave me the opportunity. He hit me up. He said, "Hey, Peacock hit me up, and they wanted the showrunner and one of the actors. We didn't know who it was going to be at the time. They want to come on our show, which was his Hidden Killers. It might have been True Crime Today, actually. No, I think it was Hidden Killers. He's got a lot of shows." And so it was Patrick McManus, and it turned out to be uh, the actor who was playing John Wayne Gacy, which is Michael Chernus. You may know him from Severance. If you watched that, he played the lead actor, his sister's husband. He was the author. He was phenomenal in that. The guy's a phenomenal actor, and just by the look of him, because he does bear some striking similarities to John Wayne Gacy, which I'm sure he loves to hear. But I was excited about the casting because of the fact that I thought that physically he was going to nail it. And I just knew his acting chops that I thought that he would really, really do a fine job. And I have to say that I was not disappointed. He absolutely nails that role. We'll get into that more. But what I want to start with is this clip from Tony's live where I was able to sit in on this interview. And of course, Tony at some point was able to incorporate me. And it was a surprise to both of them. Like neither of them knew I was going to be there. Even though Tony gave him warning in an email, he said, "Hey, Bob Motta is going to be there," or Bob Motta the second, junior, whatever you want to call me. But NBC didn't see it. Peacock didn't see it. So let me pull that up and then we'll get into what I'm hoping to do tonight is go through a review of episode 1. So if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert. If you have seen it, then I think that you'll find it interesting. I'm going to stick to it as, one episode at a time. And as I give you guys a little bit of an opportunity to watch them, I'm probably not going to do them every day. Obviously, I'm not going to wait till every Friday either. I'll probably wait a few days in between, hoping that you guys watch it and hoping that you're interested in watching what I'm going to do with it, because I want to compare and contrast. Obviously my podcast is very lengthy. It's the deepest, like I said, it's the deepest dive into the case that exists. So it's not fair to compare what they're able to do in 8 episodes of a series where they have very limited time and they have to pick and choose what they're going to cover within that particular 8 episodes. So it's challenging. And I know that that's challenging for them. And I thought that they did an excellent job. I think that out of everything that I've seen in terms of scripted, it's far and away the best representation of the Gacy case by far. Out of anything in terms of scripted, it's and Michael Chernus just crushes it. Just absolutely crushes the role. All right, so let me pull it up, and we're going to just listen to a few minutes of this. I kind of fast forwarded to where I'm able to talk to Michael because it was fulfilling. It was fulfilling for me to talk to him, and it was fulfilling to hear what he had to say. So
why he was able to get away with it for as long as he did, and Michael, with all due respect, Michael, and all love, he embodied it.
Yeah. Bob Motta with us, defense attorney, Bob Motta Jr. Bob's dad was on his legal team. He was one of Gacy's attorneys. Bob, one of your gifts you got, correct me if I'm wrong, from your father was the tapes, was tapes of Mr. Gacy himself. And you got to hear, and your dad obviously, knew firsthand what it was like, what this man was like. Can you speak to that? The portrayal of John in the series, he's exactly what we just described. He is kind of likable for being the character that he is. What was your dad's impression, and what did you glean off of those tapes when you got those back in the day?
Well, so I did a podcast, which I hope all of you listened to. I'm assuming you did. The show sounds like it's an awful lot like my podcast in terms of I didn't want to necessarily focus on Gacy at all because it had been done ad nauseum. I wanted to focus on the victims, which I did, the arrest, the investigation, which only went 10 days with displays, and then obviously the trial, as my dad was one of the trial attorneys. And so I went into the podcast. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have my father. I've got this is a shoe in terms of the interviews that I was lining up for that. So I asked my father, the first thing I asked him is, what was your impression of John Wayne Gacy when you first met him? And this is in the podcast. He says to me, Bob, he was an arrogant prick is what he said, which really kind of articulated it in a way that after I listened to the tapes, because I had the tapes for 30 years and never fully listened to them. Because they're that disturbing. And
you didn't put them in your car, when you're mixtapes for girlfriends. It's here's Ace of Base, here's Lionel Richie, and here's a little snippet of John.
Yeah, no,
you know, Ace of Base.
Yes,
all right.
I saw the sign.
Skipping in deep. Yeah, right. No, I really didn't. Oddly enough, I got him for my 21st birthday, and I'm in my 50s now, so I had him for a long time. It was my friends that had that kind of just morbid interest and curiosity that really wanted to listen to him more than I did. And then, but Michael, I did quite a bit of voice acting in my podcast of trying to get into the mind of Gacy. And it's a scary, weird place to be. So, I can really feel where you're coming from with respect to, you kind of really getting into that character, because to me, and obviously is that being a weird part of my life since I was 10 years old and really knowing everything about the whole story because of my father's involvement in the case, I was like, man, this dude was the scariest of them all because of everything that Patrick was just talking about. His ability to be this chameleon where he's just so affable and likable. He was like, I would always say he was kind of like the Norm character in Cheers when he'd walk in the bar. And it was true. He was that guy, to the people that knew him. They really, really liked him and enjoyed him. But he just had that switch that it was always lurking. It was always there. It wasn't like, when it was kill time, whether, when he goes out to troll at 2 a.m. and ends up his kill time is usually early morning hours. I mean, it was always lurking, and you saw it most when he kind of, lost sight of what worked for him in terms of being able to operate for so long with Robert Peace, his last victim, where he just kind of, he put it all out there in terms of how he operated. And, it was so evident that it was clear that Rob Peace had been snatched up by Gacy that, he had to have known at that point that he was going to get caught, so it was, yeah, man. I mean, Michael, I hope that you were able to listen to the tapes, because like hearing him, his callousness, his ability to not have any remorse or thought whatsoever about these kids' lives that he ended was beyond chilling, man.
Michael, how did you get into the character for like, what did you do to get yourself prepared to really to get in the skin of Gacy, pardon the dark pun there, but to be him and to play him in the unique way that this character needs to be played?
Well, first of all, thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm so excited that Bob Motta Jr. is here. I said before we started recording, I feel like I'm meeting a little kid meeting a celebrity or something. Because I did listen to the Defense Diaries, the John Gacy tapes a lot. What an incredible resource that was for me. I know that wasn't the intention in releasing those tapes, but for me, there isn't a ton of, there's hardly any video footage of him. There's really just 2 kind of main interviews, and those are way after he'd already been convicted and been incarcerated for a long time. So to have access to his, not just his speaking voice, but just his mind, for lack of a better word, so shortly after he'd been arrested, that was just, it was an incredible insight. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your dad. I think John Gacy was an arrogant prick, and I don't find him charming. I understand what people mean when they say he was charming, but I don't think he was very charming. I think he was persuasive. I think he was manipulative. I think he was actually a good actor. He knew how to read a room. He knew what other people wanted him to be in any moment. So if they needed him to be the jolly joker, happy neighbor, he could do that. If they wanted him to be kind of raunchy, one of the guys, he could do that. If he needed to be kind of the Polish immigrant, blue collar guy, he wore masks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The clown was just one of those many masks that I think, has been wrongly portrayed in the media, that this idea of the killer clown, that was just like a small part of who he was. It was one of the many clubs and faces that clubs he belonged to and faces that he wore to slip by. He got away with it for so long. He would, make cops feel uncomfortable by talking about homosexuality, and they just like kind of turn the other cheek. Or so to get into him, I think I thought about it a lot in that way, that there were just these multiple Johns. I mean, he even said it, and there were all these different Gacy's, and trying to just think in any given scene, like, which version am I embodying? And we knew that we did never want to do like the mustache twirly kind of like evil serial killer thing. That it was more subtle than that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, I don't know. Early on, I was like, I don't know. I sort of didn't know how to embody him because he's such a mystery. And Bob, you talk about that on the podcast. Like this guy was also just, forgive my French, but he was batshit crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's no logic really. He goes one way and then he goes another, and then he's saying he did do it, and then he's saying he didn't do it. And so for me, it eventually became that thing of like, who am I talking to, and what do they want? Who do they want me to be, and how can I manipulate them, and how can I appear harmless until that final moment when I am very harmful. But I was very afraid to be charming. I didn't want people to like him. Yeah. I didn't want the audience to go away and be like, I like him. And then I think Patrick said to me, like, you have to go there, because then we understand why someone would get in that car, why someone would take that job at PDM, why someone would, share a beer with him or share a joint with him. We have to understand that, and as an audience also kind of experience that of like being drawn in by him and then realizing who he is.
Man, I'm really excited to see your performance, man, because I mean, what you were just saying really kind of embodies exactly what he was. And and I've seen, obviously there's been a few movies out, with various different actors, but in terms of what you just said, and I know your chops in terms of your acting skills, because I've seen quite a few things that you've been in, man. I'm really excited to see it, man. I am. I think that it sounds like you guys nailed this thing.
I'm excited for you to see it, Bob, because like I was very inspired by your podcast and a number of other, and I know you know the book, but Boys Enter the House, like this aspect of the story of just what was lost is really what our show is about, and when people are taken from us in their youth, in their prime, any death is tragic, but it's just it's unconscionable, like ripping away someone, when they have a summer job, or when they're just bought a car, or they just had their first girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Like, it's like kids in high school, kids just out of high school. Like, man, the fact that this guy got the airtime that he got in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s it was so wrong. He's an uninteresting, despicable human being. I love that you called him the creep, Bob, that you wouldn't even say his name after a while in the podcast. That really stuck with me.
Thank you, man.
The horror of him, it was I would say he has a folksy appeal to him, and I think it may hit people different depending on where you are in the country or where you grew up in the country. Bob grew up, there in that area. I grew up in that general area too. People did kind of talk like that. I feel like I knew many people that on the surface, were kind of Gacy-like, a lot of used car dealers, but there was that level of you didn't quite know what was going on with some people behind the curtain, and Gacy, obviously, it was far more extreme than anyone could have imagined. I wonder, at the end of the day, and I'll ask you this, Michael. Do you think John knew exactly who he was, or was he just such a chameleon? He's always just changing skins because he was so uncomfortable in his own that he didn't know who he was. We see it in the Michael, in the Brian Kohberger case, where he seems to be always taking different snippets of different horrible characters from the past. I mean, including even fictional ones like Norman Bates and the American Psycho character, to make up who he is when we look at who he became with the horrible Idaho murders. There are seemingly remnants of that here with Gacy, of the constant chameleon, constantly, I'm going to play the room to whoever the crowd is the best I can for whatever my narcissistic needs are. Again, long question, but do you think John knew who he was?
I don't think he knew who he was. I don't think he had a real level of self-awareness in that sense. But I do think he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I do think that I don't buy into the theory that he was like killing off parts of himself that he hated, or that he wasn't comfortable in his skin. I think if he was born straight, he would have killed women. I think he was a psychopath. I think he was a true psychopath. Yeah. And I think that, he claimed that when he killed Tim McCoy, his first victim, he had an orgasm. Mm-hmm. And I think like there was a real bloodlust thing. I think it got him off.
Yeah.
And I think he was like hunting. He was out every night. I mean, he killed 33 people that we know of, and that's a huge number, but he picked up thousands of guys.
Yeah.
He let a lot of them go. He tortured a lot of them. Some of them he brought them back to his house and just talked and got high and passed out on the couch. I mean, he was always seeking something: booze, drugs, sex. I think he was like an addict in that sense. And I don't believe that he was killing any of his victims because they were gay or he thought they were gay. It was always if they cheated him out of money, if they changed the price on him, if they said they were going to tell his neighbors or his friends that he was picking up boys, if they were blackmailing him. It was always like if he felt he was being wronged, if he was being a victim, if he was being backed into a corner, then he would kill someone. So it was always just about him. He was a narcissist. It was just
massive narcissist.
And it was all just self-protection. Like if he felt like, even with Rob Peast, he said he was probably going to let him go. And then Rob said, "Oh, gee, Mr. Gacy, I thought you were going to kill me there for a second." He was like, "Yeah, he planted that one seed you don't want planted." And
yeah.
Patrick, how difficult is it to write for a character like that? That, I mean, obviously,
Oops. So I'm going to stop it there. I highly recommend everybody go to Tony's channel. I think it's for the True Crime Today show. He's got multiple things that he does on YouTube, but that True Crime Today, and I think it was last week. It's worth watching the entire episode. So I highly recommend you go and check it out. So I want to shift now into what kind of the point of this live is, and that's I want to talk about episode 1 of The Devil in Disguise and kind of point out some of the things that are missing, the holes. And I go in that into that concept with prefacing it by saying, again, this was an 8-episode series run. Okay. They all range in the probably 50-minute time range. And so they're going to be limited in terms of everything that they can capture. And they have to do things like make amalgams of different people that were involved in the case. They couldn't possibly have every single person that was involved in the case. So, sometimes you'll see when you get deeper into the series and you see the psychiatrist that my father and Sam hired, Rappaport, they don't use him. They use a fictitious person who was an amalgam of one of the 4 psychiatrists that the defense hired to evaluate Gacy and to testify on the defense's behalf, on Gacy's behalf at trial, because it was an insanity defense trial. It was an insanity defense case. They were saying that John Wayne Gacy was innocent by way of insanity. So, which a lot of people don't understand, like I don't think like that was probably the number one way that I would kind of rebuff people when I was young, very young, way pre-lawyer, when people are like, how could your dad represent him? And, I'm like, well, first of all, we all have that constitutional right. It's always the first line of defense. But in terms of the morality side of it, I would explain to people, like, well, this wasn't the defense saying he didn't do it. All right. This was them saying that he was insane, that he was compelled to do the things that he did. He didn't have control over his mind. His mind was broken. And, but trying to convince 12 people that a man in their eyes, in their estimation, could potentially somehow walk out of a mental hospital if he's deemed cured after killing 33 young boys and men was never going to work, right? I mean, you're never convincing a jury of that, and they're never going to come down the way that you need them to come down in that case. And again, I'll say it. Uh, my father's opening statement, which was really an opening argument because he had to, uh, because Sam Amaranti gave the closing and just didn't have a grasp of the insanity defense the way that my father did. And it's one of the most breathtaking explanations of the insanity defense that you'll ever hear, ever. It should be taught in colleges. That's how powerful it is. And it's in the podcast. So I was able to coax my father into performing his opening statement. And that was a powerful moment for me as I sat and watched him do it. But just a couple of things. One, the series is called Devil in Disguise. It is on Peacock. All 8 episodes are out now. Somebody told me that it was on Prime as well. That doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe you can pay for it. I don't know. But it's a Peacock original, and it dropped yesterday, so it's hot off the presses. Our podcast, which is a remastered, rebranded version of the Gacy Tapes, which originally dropped a few years ago. Darren has been able to do incredible work with the tapes. It has changed the way and the feel of the entire podcast, not having to struggle. I spent a lot of time in the podcast apologizing for the sound of the tapes because it was just very difficult to get them to a point where you could hear it. They're of such a quality now that it's almost like you're sitting in the room with my father and Gacy. It's unbelievable. It's really changed it. If you've listened to the podcast once, I implore you to please go back and listen to it again. It's a different experience. Even though you kind of know all the big things that we uncover in the podcast, just hearing in its totality, being able to hear the tapes as clearly as they're able to be heard now is worth the price of admission. So those are those two things. We're going to be dropping the podcast, which is called Buried Inside the John Wayne Gacy Investigation. That dropped yesterday. It's on its own feed. It's not on Defense Diaries feed. If you were in the middle of listening to the Gacy tapes, we apologize. We pulled it off of the Defense Diary feed. I was adamant about not putting this on the Defense Diary feed because it's a mess on Apple. You can't find anything. You can't articulate what's what. Everything's just a season. I didn't want people to have to dig for it. I wanted them to be able to click and listen. And the way that we're going to do it is we're going to be dropping 2 episodes per week, like clockwork. None of the bullshit that you have to deal with Garcia. I know you're waiting for me to finish it. The last 6 episodes are coming. I promise. It's just like every time that I'm trying to finish it, something like this pops up, and like I have to run the business. I have to do the things that are going to help Allison and I keep this thing afloat. So bear with me on Garcia. But again, we will be dropping the link. I beg of you, the one thing that you can do to help us support the show, to help us support the podcast, to help us get the podcast out to the world at large, is to simply go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts and click follow, subscribe, whatever it is, download the episode, leave a 5-star review. If you have the time and the wherewithal, write a review. And that goes so far in helping us get this thing out. And this was my opus that season. And I know people love Garcia, and I know people are like, wow, I think I might like Garcia better than Gacy. Well, I appreciate that, because that, like, Garcia's all been written by me, as Gacy was as well. I had to do more writing on Garcia because I didn't do interviews. Gacy was a boots on the ground investigation, and there is nothing that will compare with what we uncovered during that investigation in relation to that case. And that includes Garcia. It's a masterpiece, and I if that makes me sound like a egomaniac, egomaniacal asshole, I don't care. It is. It is. If anybody can tell me that's listened fully to Gacy, and once you listen to it with the sound clear, that there's a better podcast that exists, and I've listened to all the big ones. It's not to say that there aren't some that are as good, but I don't know that there's one that's better than Gacy, and it's just different than any other podcast that I've ever heard. So, I just, if you guys can do that for us, it would be huge. We would be so appreciative. All right, enough of that. Okay, so episode 1, and again, I'm going to give you a spoiler. If you have not seen it, I'm going to be talking about basically the first episode in its entirety. All right, and because what I want to do is talk about the things that they skipped, and I get why they skipped them, but that are so important to the fabric of the case, and just the things that are incorrect. And I'm hesitant, because those of you that haven't listened to the podcast, the thing that we uncovered about the investigation that changed the narrative of that case, and it's not a theory, it came directly from the police. I then vetted it from the one cop who wasn't with the Des Plaines Police Department, who was the evidence tech. It happened. The way that we uncovered it, what they did to get Gacy off the streets, that we're the only people in the history of that case to uncover, is unbelievable. When I uncovered it, I thought it was going to be front page news on every newspaper in the country, on every newscast, because it was that big. It is that big. And I hope that this show gets out there to the point where people are going to realize, like, holy shit, yeah, Gacy's dead. Yeah, nothing's going to be done about it. It's ex post facto, but still, in terms of one of the most infamous cases in the history of this country, for us to have unequivocally changed the narrative of that case forever, how it really went down, is just an unbelievable part of that story. And I'm nervous about talking about that part of it, because I don't want to spoil that for you, because it happens. Actually, we were probably 10 weeks into our investigation, our boots on the ground investigation, when we uncovered it. It started with my interview of Mike Albrecht, who is a central character in the series, at least in the first 3 episodes. So first episode is called 10 Days. Now, that 10 days is referring to the 10 days that it took Des Plaines police to get Gacy off the streets once and for all. It was a 10-day, 24/7 surveillance of Gacy after his last victim, Rob Peast, went missing. And that was December 11th of 1978. And if you don't know any of the story, the beginning of the show does a nice job of kind of summarizing what happened with Rob. Later in the show, they revisit it, and that was kind of the flow and the structure of this show, which I'll say, in terms of the way that they chose to do it, which I was not surprised, because Patrick McManus, who was, again, the executive producer and showrunner for the show, he's like, we were not showing any of the homicides in graphic detail. We decided collectively, and especially Patrick himself when he was writing it, I was going to focus on the victims, which is the same thing that we wanted to do, and we did do in our podcast. We, of course, had the tapes in there, which I felt had historical value, and I felt that the public deserved to be able to hear because it is a part of our fabric of our history in this country, a terrible, dark part of our history, but it's part of the history nonetheless. So, and I thought that it was selfish of me not to put him out to the world for free for everybody to listen to, so that we could try to all have an understanding of who the fuck that guy was and just how broken he was. And being able to hear him so soon after he's arrested, preparing for that trial with my father, where my father goes at him hard as his attorney, who's trying to prepare an insanity defense with a client who is just not willing to work with him, is fascinating stuff. Like, you've just never heard anything like it. If you've heard any kind of defense lawyer interviewing their client, preparing for trial at length, that is a guy of that kind of notoriety, let me know. Because as far as I know, it doesn't exist other than in our podcast. And so the way that it starts out at Nissan Pharmacy, okay, which was in Des Plaines, Illinois. And Rob was working that night. Now, the first thing that they did, and they'll always tell you, if you watch, I can't remember if it's in the beginning or the end, that they fictionalize certain things, that they have to take creative liberties in terms of getting the thing done. So that, they're always going to tweak things, and I have zero criticism about that at all. But what I do want to do is point out the things that I think were significant in terms of a story that has some fictionalized parts in it and the reality of the case itself. So it starts out accurately with Rob working on again on the 11th of December. It's the evening. What they did is they morphed together two different occurrences that happened on that day. And it really went to, and it was important to me to point this out because it goes to the depths of just exactly how calculating and calculated Gacy really was. So he's in there putting a bid on a job at Nissan. He had worked with Phil Torf on the store prior. He had done other jobs in there. And Torf had called him and said, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Gacy said, all right, I'll be over there. Gacy often worked into the evening, sometimes up until midnight. And on this particular occasion, which the show doesn't put forth, because again, they really turned it into kind of one occurrence. But what had actually happened is it was before 7 p.m. Gacy goes over to Nissan to check out what Torf wants him to do, and he's going to prepare a bid. While he's there, Rob Peace catches his eye. Rob Peace is a good-looking kid. He's 15 at that point. He's working this job at the pharmacy, making $250 an hour. Again, this is 1978. Hoping to save for a car when he turns 16 years old. All-American looking kid, honor roll kid, good son, loving brother, loving son, just a wonderful kid. And he immediately catches Gacy's eye, and Gacy, being Gacy, kind of throws it out there immediately, talking within earshot of Rob Peast while Rob's stocking shelves. He says, hey, I'm looking for kids. I'm going to pay $5 an hour. I need some good kids, some hardworking kids. Now, the reality is what he said is for a summer job. The show kind of changed it to like he was going to hire somebody immediately. That wasn't necessarily the case, but like he put it out there as if he wanted to hire kids for the summer. And so Rob hears him, and Rob doesn't do anything about it. So like Gacy throws the lure out there. Rob hears it but doesn't bite, meaning he doesn't go to Gacy and say, hey, Mr. Gacy, I heard what you were saying. I wasn't eavesdropping, but you were talking loud, whatever, and he says, I'm interested, because that's double what I'm making. I'm trying to save up to get this car. And so what happens is that Gacy intentionally, at around 7 o'clock, leaves his appointment book, which he referred to as his Bible. Okay. He then drives home, which is about 12 minutes away. Gacy lives in unincorporated Norridge, which is a suburb of Chicago. And he waits. And within a half an hour, Phil Torf calls him, and Gacy answers. And Phil says, "Hey, man, you left your appointment book here. You're going to probably want to come get it." Gacy says, "Oh yeah, what time you closing down?" And in the show they changed it to 10. In reality, it was 9. So Gacy then waits instead of driving the 12 minutes to go pick up his appointment book. He waits until a quarter till 9 to drive back over to the pharmacy. Point being, he wants to wait until just about the time that Rob's getting off work. And Gacy, of course, doesn't know that it happens to be Rob Peast's mother. It's her birthday. And we're talking about Elizabeth Peast, who had driven to the pharmacy to pick Rob up so that they could go home together and celebrate, have cake, sing happy birthday, do what families do on a family birthday occasion. And so Gacy gets there after Miss Peace gets there. Miss Peace goes into the store, and at that point, Rob says, "Hey, Mom, I'm just wrapping up." And what happens in the interim is that Gacy walks in, doesn't say anything to anybody, talks to Torf. Torf hands him the appointment book, and then Gacy leaves, and then goes and sits in his car. And so the way that the show had it was that Miss Peast went out, sat in her car. Rob went up to her and said, "Oh, I got to talk to this guy about a summer job." That conversation did take place, but Miss Peast stayed in the store waiting for Rob to come back because Rob said it was going to take 5 minutes. Says, I'm just going to be there a few minutes. I just got to tell him I want to work with him and see if I can get that job. So Rob runs out. Rob's never seen again, ever. Miss Peast waits at the store probably till 9:45, 45 minutes. Obviously, they go out. Rob's nowhere to be found. Miss Peast then asks Torf, who was that contractor? Torf says, "Oh, that's John Gacy. He's a good guy." And she said, "Well, my son just said that he was going to talk to him, and now he's vanished." And he says, "Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know." So she says, "Okay." So the way that the show had it is they had her drive home. The reality is she drove immediately to the Des Plaines Police Department. And at that point, Lieutenant Kozenzak, who is kind of the main character in the series in terms of the Des Plaines Police, was not at work anymore. And she talks to the guy that's sitting at the sergeant at the desk and tells him, "Hey, my son's gone missing. And, don't tell me he ran away. He's a good kid. He didn't run away." He said he was talking to a contractor named John Gacy, and we don't know where he is. And you need to do something right now. And so he says, "Well, I'll run it up to one of the detectives." She ends up going home, obviously extremely upset. And at that point, that night, he runs it up to one of the detectives because he's underage. They run it through a particular department that deals with missing youth and crimes involving children, and they end up running Gacy's name. And then so that night they don't get a hit, but the following day they get a hit, and something comes in that he was convicted in Iowa many years ago. At that point, 1968 to be exact, and that he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and it was for a sodomy charge, and it was based on this assault, this essay that he had committed against a young man back in Iowa. Back then, just like the mindset of most of America, they were very backwards in thinking in terms of homosexuality and, people being gay. And so the statutes reflected that. So the sodomy thing was the only thing that they could think to charge him with, when it was really an essay flat out. And so Gacy goes to trial on it. He ends up losing and he gets the 10 years. He ends up getting paroled in a year and a half. And now Gacy's mother lived in Chicago, and he went to the parole board in Iowa and said, "Well, if I live with my mother, can I do my parole there? My mother's elderly. I want to be there to care for her." So he gets approved, and that's when he moves back to Illinois. And had Gacy served his entire sentence, he would have gotten out on December 11th or the 10th of December of 1978. He would have been in for the entire period of time from 72 to 78 when he was actively killing people. So now I'm going to, I keep slipping into doing the podcast for you, and I don't want to do that. So, all right. So they morph those two circumstances together where Gacy leaves and comes back. It's an important distinction that he was that calculated. He was that premeditated. And, that's the way that it really happened. So that's a major difference there. And then they really kind of cram in this first episode the entire 10 days into the first 54 minutes in terms of the 24/7 surveillance of Gacy, which was open and notorious, because as you listen to the tapes and you hear me interviewing the cops who were on surveillance, they'll tell you why he was made. It's worth listening. I'm not going to give you a bunch of spoilers. I'm going to force you to listen to the podcast because it's fascinating hearing these old cops who were all great guys, they really were, and they were all very honest about the mindset back then and what went so horribly wrong. Not so much with Des Plaines, but with the Chicago Police Department, who I absolutely flamethrow in my podcast. I am ruthless. I put probably 30 of the deaths on Chicago PD. They should have had Gacy under arrest after John Bukovich, who was Gacy's third victim, very early on. But Chicago police did nothing for years, which is one of the things that I appreciate that this particular series highlighted, because as far as I knew, aside from one reporter back in 1980 named Jay Levine, I found nothing anywhere about how Chicago police fucking dropped the ball and cost dozens of kids their lives because of their incompetence, their indifference, whatever it was. They did nothing. They just kept sloughing it all out. Oh, it was it was a gay fight. Oh, the kids just ran away. They did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so the next scene, okay, and you've got Michael Chernus as Gacy, which you guys just saw him. You've got an actress named Marin Ireland and an actor named Greg Burke playing the Peasts, so Elizabeth and Harold Peast. You've got Joe Kozenzak, who's a lieutenant, who was passed away. He was deceased when I did the podcast, but he is a focus of my podcast. And he was played by an actor named James Badgedale. You'll probably recognize him. I did. I couldn't remember what he was in, but I recognized his face. And then Detective Raphael Tovar. And Tovar is the first detective that we ended up interviewing in our podcast. And he was played by an actor named Gabriel Luna. And it didn't surprise me that Tovar seems to be the central character aside from Kozenzak in terms of the detectives, because it was very much that when we interviewed Tovar, it was a running joke between Darren and I that Tovar gave a great interview. He had done many interviews by the time that we had gotten to him, and we were the last interview of a lot of these cops because these guys have been doing it for 40 years. And but by the time we got to Rafael Tovar, he basically, when you listen to him, he did everything. Like every major break in the case was due to Tovar's incredible detective work. So it's funny when you listen to it because you'll hear some of the other cops kind of laugh about it, like Raphael. And don't get me wrong, he did a phenomenal job as a detective, but he did take credit for almost everything. And we know that there were certain things that he can't take credit for because we knew that he wasn't there when it happened. But you know what? I mean, time's funny. Our memories fade. It changes. It elaborates on things, whatever the case may be. But Tovar is kind of the main character in terms of the detectives. And as you go through the eight episodes, you'll see that he is the primary guy from the detective level, aside from Lieutenant Kozenzak. So where it goes from there, where the next big discrepancy is that in reality, the following day, Kozenzak has the Peast family come in, and they're obviously extremely upset. Miss Peast is just an absolutely ferocious mama bear. Like I took a little, like, there were very few things I took umbrage with, but to not reflect just how adamant Mrs. Peast was with respect to them doing the fucking job, kind of like that sat with me and made me a little like it was off-putting a little bit because I knew that she was the impetus. That's not to say that Harold Peast wasn't obviously upset, but she was your typical mama bear, the one that's going in and forcing hands and saying, "You're going to get this shit done. I'm going to be all over you. I'm not going anywhere. My kid didn't run away." She was that mom. And it so turns out that Lieutenant Kozenzak's son was attended the same high school that Rob Peast did. So immediately there's a connection with Kozenzak and Mrs. Peast and the Peast family. He immediately takes on this kind of like it's a personal endeavor for him. Like there's this connection. This could have been my son. I'm going to solve this thing for you, come hell or high water. So that does happen. But they make it seem like that happened that night. That actually happened the following day, and they end up being able to secure a warrant on from the 12th going into the 13th. Okay, so Rob goes missing in the evening of the 11th. There's a full day. They get the background on Gacy. They find out about the Iowa case, which is again an underage minor. It's an essay. It kind of fits. You've got a witness that says, "Okay, Rob said he was going out to talk to this contractor." You don't have a witness that sees Rob talk to Gacy outside. You don't have a witness that sees Rob get into Gacy's vehicle. So you do have that hole in terms of evidence where you're trying to go in and argue they have the probable cause in order to get into Gacy's house. But they had enough from Kim Byers' statement, which I'll get into Kim Byers in just a second. But Kim Byers is a coworker of Rob, and then obviously you had Phil Torf, the Nissan pharmacy owner. So you had their statements that Gacy had been in there, that Rob had said where everyone could hear him, "I'm running out to talk to this contractor. I'll be right back. I'll be back in 5 minutes." So in theory, you don't have to jump too much of a logical leap to think that something most likely happened with Gacy, that something in the interim went down with Gacy. So the judge issues the warrant, and on the 13th of December, well, let me go back. So what happens before that, which was completely changed in the show. In the show, they had Tovar go to Gacy's house on the evening of the 12th, the early evening of the 12th. That was really Kozenzak and another cop. Okay. So in Gacy at that point still has Rob Peace in his attic. Okay. So in the show, it's Tovar. In reality, it's the Lieutenant Kozenzak. He knocks on the door, and Gacy does, and they accurately portray the conversation that takes place between Kozenzak and Gacy, wherein Gacy's on the phone, or he's telling Kozenzak, "My uncle's sick and dying in the hospital. I'm dealing with it. I can't come with you now. I can't invite you in the house. I've got a family emergency that's happening in real time." So and at that point, Kozenzak doesn't have a warrant, right? So what's he going to do? So Kozenzak ends up saying to the cop that came with him, he's like, "I want you to sit on the house." He's like, "I don't give a shit. I just want you to sit on the house. I don't care if you're hidden or not. This doesn't have to be surreptitious. I just want you sitting on the house. I want you to tell me if he fucking leaves." And so Kozenzak ends up leaving. He ends that conversation by telling Gacy that he expects him to the police department at some point that evening. So Kozenzak goes back, because this interview took place about 6:00 in the evening. Again, this is December. It's dark out. So at that point, Kozenzak goes back to the Des Plaines PD and waits up until about 10:00. Gacy's a no-show. And in the meantime, this cop is sitting here on Gacy's house down the block a bit. And somehow, and and I saw some people asking in the chat about Gacy's potential accomplices, which were David Cram and Michael Rossi. Everybody is terrified in everything I've ever seen, in everything I've ever read, books, anything, articles, are always terrified to talk about Michael Rossi. I am not. We are not. We talk about him constantly in the podcast. And I saw people asking if they thought that we believed that they were accomplices. And yes, I absolutely do think that they were accomplices. And I'll get into that in a later episode when we're going through a review. But Kramer Rossi was there that night, and somehow Gacy is able to get out of the driveway and not be tailed by the cop. They run some kind of a move wherein Gacy's able to get Rob's body out of the attic into the back of the Oldsmobile, not the PDF, not his PDM truck, which is his van for his work, which we think was parked behind his Oldsmobile in the driveway, because Gacy had a side entrance to his home, which is where everybody came in. Like, so only like a cop or somebody that doesn't know Gacy would knock on the front door of Gacy's house. Gacy always came and went out of the side door of his house. In the show, they have it in the back, but it was actually on the side. So the cop was sitting far enough back to where Gacy's able to get Rob into the vehicle, presumably into the trunk. And we know now that he ends up dumping Rob into the Des Plaines River late at night. So what does happen, which was completely skipped, which surprised Allison and I a bit because it's significant, is that Gacy does make it to the Des Plaines Police Department at about 2:30, 3 in the morning. And he walks in, and it's noted in the police reports, which I had all the police reports, right? So it's noted by the guy that's sitting at the front desk, the desk sergeant, that Gacy walks in and he's got mud all over the lower portion of his jeans. And it is also known that Gacy did, in fact, when he pulled off the road and he went way down south on 55, way down the Des Plaines River, far away from where it runs up north, in order to dump Rob over the bridge. And he got stuck. He got stuck in the snowy mud to the point where he had to call a tow truck to come and pull him out. So imagine that. Gacy has just either pulled in to dispose of Rob's body and or has already disposed of it and then has to call a tow truck to pull him out. But there's a record of the tow. So Gacy gets there, asks if Kozenzak is still there. The guy says, no, man, it's 3 a.m. He's not, he's gone. He's home sleeping. And Gacy says, okay, well, make sure that you tell him that I came and then I'll try to come back in the morning if I can work it out. Guy says, okay. So they write up a report that Gacy did show up, had the muddy clothes, and that he left and said that he was going to come back the following day. Okay, so that's the 12th, okay, leading into the 13th. On the 13th, Gacy does come to the police department, okay, and it's probably mid-afternoon. In the interim, Terry Sullivan, and who is the prosecuting attorney for the 3rd district, which is Rolling Meadows, got in front of a judge along with one of the cops, and they were able to secure the first search warrant on Gacy's house, which was issued on the 13th. While Gacy's sitting in the interview, which they accurately depict, they come in and say, hey, just want to let you know, because Gacy's just, talking shit. I didn't even see him. I didn't talk to him. I certainly didn't kidnap him, whatever. They're at that point pretty suspicious of him. So they end up getting the warrant on the probable cause that I've just told you about. And while Gacy's sitting in this interview room, they tell him, well, we got a warrant for your house. We're going to go over and search it. And the way that they portrayed it in the show was that, Gacy was pretty easily persuaded, and then he ended up handing the keys. In reality, there was a much more vigorous dispute between Gacy wanting to give up the keys to his house. Ultimately, they end up saying, well, we can go kick your door in, do all kinds of damage, or you can give us the keys. Gacy's finally like, fuck it, whatever, take the keys. I mean, at that point, Gacy knows that he's cleaned up what he needed to clean up in terms of his crimes, and specifically with his crimes regarding Rob Peast. So this was a major discrepancy and something that they changed in the show from the reality of what it was. And it's a major point for me, because that search on the 13th is a really important part of my investigation into the case, because that is the thing that I uncover what became a legendary story about that case and what it turned out to not be true at all. And so the way that they portray it in the show is that they have Kozenzak end up, he gets 7 or 8 cops that he sends over there. Kozenzak, of course, goes with them. In the show, they just had Mike Albrecht, who was the second cop we interviewed, and a fictional amalgam cop go with Albrecht over there. And those are the 2 guys who conduct the search, when in reality, it was 8 or 9 guys, plus Carl Humbert, who was the evidence tech from the Cook County Sheriff's Police, who became my smoking gun, who nobody had ever spoken to other than me in 40 plus years. And I found him, and he was the evidence tech. That means he's the guy that's following all the detectives around and the cops around when they're searching the house. Hey, I got something over here. He'd come, he'd note it, he'd take the picture where it was found, he'd put it in his report, say where it was going to be sent, and document it, right? So in the show, none of that happens. It was strange, because I'm curious if Patrick listened to the podcast. I feel like he had to have, he didn't say whether he did or he didn't in the interview. I think that there was probably some hesitation to admit that they had listened to it because I think, and again, I surprised they didn't know I was going to be there. So, but I feel very comfortable in having watched it that, they went their own way. Yes, they focused on the victims, which I love. I didn't want it to be a focus on Gacy. I really wanted them to tell the victim stories, which we do in the podcast. I was like really the first creator to ever do that with the Gacy case, to really try to humanize these kids who lost their lives, who nobody really knew anything about other than Rob Peast. And I think that we did a very good job of it. And we used the same source, which was author David Nelson, his book, Boys Enter the Home, or Boys Enter the House, when I was in production of the podcast. It came out, I was probably on episode 18, 19, something like that, when I heard that the book was coming out that he had researched for 10 years. So ultimately, like I was a little curious as to whether or not, Patrick had listened to it. Because what they end up doing is they steer so clear of what actually happened with respect to that search that it was kind of like shocking to me. So, I mean, us as true crime nerds over here, and just law nerds, when you watch that search in the show, you're gonna be like, what the fuck is going on? So you got two cops wandering around just picking shit up. No one's wearing gloves, no one's bagging anything, no one's protecting anything, in terms of making sure they're not contaminating the evidence. They're picking up the handcuffs and they're picking up Zick's ring on his finger, and they added the torture board, which was the thing that Gacy would put his victims in, which was actually in the shed. They put that up in the attic, and they have them find the receipt. So the search is very short in the show, whereas in reality, they searched the house very, very thoroughly on the 13th, so thoroughly that it was the cause of them having to do the 10-day 24/7 surveillance, because they did not find anything else that would have allowed them to increase the breadth of the warrant. Like, I mean, at some point they were like, well, we got to start knocking down walls. We got to start digging and shit. Like the warrant was limited in scope in terms of what they could do, where they could look, right? Like all warrants, specificity, and it's not a free for all when you go in. So they didn't find anything, or at least they didn't know that they found anything at that point that would have allowed them to go in and get another warrant. So, and they have this scene after this search wherein they have that conversation, and Kozenzak says, okay, well, what did you guys find? And they say, oh, we found like a dildo and we found like a bunch of, uh, gay porn and some handcuffs and some badges, and this school ring. And Kozenzak had an answer for all of it in the show. Oh, that could have been his cousin's ring. Oh, whatever. That's not probable cause that he kidnapped the kid. And so I think it's the fictitious detective. He's like, well, we got this. We got the receipt. He's like, what do you think that is? That's probable cause. He's like, no, that's a receipt that somebody deposited film at Nissan Pharmacy. So they have Kozenzak just whiff on that completely. All right. And that becomes a huge focus of our podcast, which I'm not going to tell you what we uncover. But that whole thing was vastly different of what really went on in terms of the investigation. So they don't get anything. They don't have anything that allows them back in. Okay. And when I'm watching and I'm sitting there, we were watching it, me and Allison and my father, I'm like, well, if Kozenzak's opinion is that the receipt, which was one of the warrant bases for the second warrant, the other was the oh, sorry, hold on, I lost you guys. The other thing was the smell, which also happens in this episode, and I'll get to in a second. So you've got these two grounds for the warrant, two things that they think amount to probable cause, and at that point, Kozenzak poo-poos the receipt. He's like, nah, we need more. So that's the impetus of the tale, right? So they got 4 guys in reality that do this tale. They had 1 car, Des Plaines Police, that they all shared. It's a small department, very little resources. I go into great detail about the detail. They speed through the 10 days. Okay. Like just speed through it. So it's like day 3, day 4, where they'll show a little scene. Gacy's in a restaurant, the guys follow him in. They're sitting out front. Gacy comes and talks to him, like, you guys want any coffee? He's kind of befriending them. The way that I describe it in the podcast, it was a game of cat and mouse, but it was a two-way street. They're trying to extract information from Gacy, and Gacy's trying to extract information from them. So they're both playing one another. They're both trying to get intel, and both of them know it. So it was one of the Gacy, an absolute monster, but not a moron. Like clearly Gacy, when he knows he's being tailed, isn't going to go out and commit any homicides, right? So you're not going to get anything like that on Gacy. All right. So you've got kind of that giant gap in terms of the investigation. So I was slightly sad that they didn't get more into the investigation, and I didn't know what to think, because this all happens in the first episode. Like the entire investigation really takes place in the first episode. And I'm like, wow, that's a far cry from the podcast. I'll tell you that. So like, as this episode was going on, I started to feel better and better that they, in fact, didn't steal my podcast, and that they wrote it on their own accord, and they went with the old narrative, which was fine with me for various reasons. But I'm like, okay, cool. And at some point, they get the second warrant, and the way that they end up portraying it is that Gacy had actually had 2 of the surveillance guys come into the house on 2 different occasions. So the first time was, it was both times to eat, because Gacy was being Gacy, thinks he's, just such an affable, magnetic guy, and they're both like, this guy's just fucking weird, and the clown picture's all up in there and all that shit. And they're just trying to get information. So on the second time that Gacy invites him in, which is right before they end up getting the warrant. So it's the Thursday night before the Friday when all the shit goes down in terms of them getting enough to get the warrant. And so none of that is really portrayed in the show. It really just makes a leap from showing the second time that the detectives are in Gacy's house. And at that point, one of the cops goes back to use the bathroom. Now, the reality is when I interviewed this particular cop, he said, look, the one thing that we knew, because they had been in contact with Chicago police regarding this kid Zick being missing, because that is something that Tovar did, which they skipped in the show, which was really a significant thing. Tovar was going through all of the old high school yearbooks from the school that this JSA class ring was from, or JAS ring. And he ends up narrowing it down to like 2 or 3 different people. Okay. And Allison's calling me. Hold on. Hello. I'm on a live.
No spoilers.
Nah. Allison's telling me not to give you all no spoilers. Yeah, I get it. It's 36 episodes. Like, how are you gonna spoil 36 episodes? All right, I love you. Bye. Allie's clearly not watching live. All right, so, or she's half watching. So at that point, he is able to narrow down like 2 or 3 people that had the initials JAS. So they end up figuring out that the ring, they believe, belonged to this kid, John Zick. So they end up going to Zick's mother, and they're like, hey, we think that we found this ring that may have belonged to your son. Now, during the first search of the house on the 13th of December, they had noticed that Gacy had this little TV that was in his room, like a portable TV. And Mrs. Zick ends up digging up the manual from this and the warranty card from this little TV. And she ends up giving it to Desplain. So they know what the serial number is on that TV. Okay. And so what the cop tells me in the pod is that the real reason they went in that house is that they were hoping that one of the cops stays in the front room with Gacy while the other one says he has to go to the bathroom, but he sneaks into Gacy's bedroom to try to see if the serial number of that TV matches the serial number from the warranty card. And he doesn't make it in there. Okay. And legend has it, the story has always been that he goes into the bathroom, the furnace kicks on, the heat register is open, and the smell of death just wafts in while he's in the bathroom, which is unmistakable. The smell of death is unmistakable. So that becomes the second grounds for the warrant. So you've got the receipt and you've got the smell. Those are the two things that end up getting Gacy back, or get the cops back into Gacy's house. And in the show, they skip all of that. So again, they have limited time. They wanted to focus, heavy victim focus, which I'm in love with. I love the way that they did it. They humanized so many of the victims. It was beautifully done. I'm a huge fan of that. But they really did kind of short shift the investigation a little bit. And they do accurately portray Coase and Zach as kind of the lone wolf, obsessed cop that he was with respect to this case. So as you progress and you get towards the end of that first episode, they end up taking Gacy into custody. Okay. They skip what he's really taken into custody for on the 21st of December. And that is, they had picked him up handing off a bag of weed to a gas station attendant. All right. At that point, they really liked Gacy, right? Like at that point, they really liked Gacy. Now, again, I don't want to give, like, part of this is hard because my dad's trial partner on the case, Sam Amaranti, which this is featured a little bit in the first episode, and then they go back to it later in the series. Like, I don't want to give any spoilers, but they do have the situation wherein the night before Gacy's arrested, that he goes into Sam's office. Sam plies him with a bunch of whiskey at Gacy's request, and Gacy pukes up everything, tells Sam everything. That's what legend has it. And the other part of the story that is also part of the legend of this case, which I have very long thoughts on, which, I flat out tell you what I think actually happened. But the way that the story goes is that after Gacy's there all night until the early morning, the wee hours of the morning. And you have two of the surveillance cops, one of them being Albrecht, sitting in the lobby of Sam's office. Sam said, "Sure, you guys can sit out there. I'm not going to make you sit out in your car in the cold." And so Gacy had fallen asleep. Sam had sat in there purportedly freaking out of all the things that Gacy had just told him. Gacy pops out of his sleep, says, "Holy shit, I got to get out of here." Runs out of, I got shit to do. Leaves Sam's office. After he's gone, Sam proceeds to walk out of the office, goes to the cops, and tells them this is what the story's always been. Not for nothing, but I'm here to tell you, if Gacy is somehow losing you or going to be out of your sight, you need to shoot his fucking tires out. So that in and of itself, if you know anything about the law, if you know anything about privilege, about attorney-client privilege, about confidentiality, he violated privilege there. I mean, he essentially told, even with just that statement, which is what they landed on in terms of what they claim that Sam said, that tells the cops, you got the right guy. My guy has just confessed to it. Now in the show, they say, hey, well, what does that mean? Well, you know what it means. You know what it means. So it then goes into, they skip the whole thing with the weed and them taking Gacy into custody. There's another portion of it, which I'm not going to give you a spoiler about, which in terms of the police reports, if it really would have happened the way that they say that it happened in the police reports, in terms of Cram and what he says allegedly, and the fact that that doesn't appear in the warrant as the primary ground for probable cause, it's inexplicable because they do just land on those two things. And so ultimately they get Gacy in there. They tell him that he is under arrest for first-degree murder, and that's just for Rob Peast. Because at that point, now they waited. They had Gacy in custody. A lot happens in that time, which I'm not going to get into here, which I get into in great depth in terms of what happens with Gacy, whether or not Sam was there during the time Gacy's in custody. And so they wait. So they get the second warrant. They go in that night, and that's when they unearth the first body in the crawl space. They go right to the crawl space, start digging, and they find the first human remains. And at that point, they go back and they get an arrest warrant and they place Gacy under arrest for first-degree murder. So that's it. So Gacy's at that point off the streets permanently. In Gacy's mind, he's walking on this thing. He's going to beat it. It's part of the delusion that is Gacy. And so ultimately, that episode, we're nearing the end of it. Okay. So you've got Gacy, and then they have some things, and it was really interesting to sit there with my father watching it, because my dad's trying to go back a long, long time in terms of remembering what went down, because the scene that they have in the show is that after Gacy's arrested for the murder, that they bring him back to the house in order to tell them where he disposed of the bodies in the crawl space. Now, I knew from having fresher eyes on the police reports that didn't happen. My dad was like, no. I remember that Gacy was bitching and complaining that they had tracked dirt all over the foyer and on his rugs. And I'm like, yeah, that did happen. But when that actually happened was after the first search. They never brought Gacy after he was in custody back to his house. But my dad's like, but I remember being there. And I think that my dad was there, but I don't think that his client was with him. I think my father and Sam were probably there, because my dad's like, I remember being in the kitchen. So it's like, I can't tell you how fascinating and enjoyable this is to watch with my dad. Now, I was a little bit upset while I was prepping for this. My dad was down there watching episode 7. I'm like, man, I want to watch this with you. So I was like, I want to watch this with you because it's a neat experience for me to be able to sit there with them. And it's interesting to watch it jar memories for him. I mean, there's probably 4 kids on the planet that can sit with their dad, and that's me, and then Sam Amarante's kids, watching that show and watching them in real time try to remember and have things rush back in their minds. It's a pretty neat experience. And I have to say I was relieved to know that my father was in the show because funny story, not funny story. When I saw the first trailer, they showed a scene of Sam prior to my father coming onto the case when Sam was in court trying to get Gacy moved into Cermak Hospital, which is the mental hospital wing of Cook County Jail. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, they erased my dad. And so I tell Allison, I'm like, I don't think my dad's in the show, you know, and like, I can't remember if I said anything to my father, but Allison definitely did. And I was upstairs and I remember hearing Allison and my dad having this conversation. I could hear it from upstairs. And my dad's real upset. He's like, what the? He's like, what? He's upset, rightfully so. You know, he's like, they're erasing my legacy. They're erasing the fact that I exist, you know. So we were all upset about this concept. And then Allie goes back and checks IMDb, I think 2 days later, because we had went in to see in IMDb if they had a cast member that was playing my father. And there was nothing in IMDb. So we're like, man, but I go back to the interview with Michael and Patrick that I did on Tony's show. And Michael specifically had told me, he's like, yeah, man, Bob, I can't wait till you see the guy that's playing the actor that's playing your father. He does a great job. So I've got these conflicting ideas wherein Michael Chernus isn't doing the final edits. I'm like, is it possible that Michael was there? He obviously did scenes with the actor that's playing my dad. So like he knows that they exist, but is it possible that they got edited out? Because Allie's looking in IMDb and my dad's not in there. So 2 days later, Allie goes back, looks in. She's like, he's here. He's in 3 episodes. So we're all very relieved. My father, of course, didn't believe it until he saw it. You know, we're like, he's like, oh, I'm not in it. We're like, Dad, we looked in IMDb. You're in it. You're in 3 episodes. And he's like, I don't know. I was like, I think I'm not in it. And we're like, Dad, you're in it. Like IMDb, we do. So he is in it. And the guy, and I kept saying to my dad, I'm like, if the guy doesn't have a fantastic mustache, I'm burning the house down because that's bullshit. I'm like, if they don't have you having your signature facial feature, then I'm burning the whole place down. So of course they did. And the guy who's playing my father does a very good job. So I was excited about that. But I'm giving you spoilers. That's like, I think my father makes his first appearance in either episode 4 or 5. So back to episode 1, we're getting close to where they're wrapping. So they start with the entire 10 days kind of speeding by. They then get into how they get the second warrant. They don't really go into the specifics of it. I do in the podcast very, very thoroughly. And so you'll have when people ask me, what should I do first? Should I watch the show or should I listen to the podcast? You should definitely watch the show first and foremost, because the entire podcast, like I said, we've pulled the whole thing. It doesn't exist. We're dropping 2 episodes a week without fail. Obviously, everything has been produced. Obviously, everything is ready to go. So we're going to drop them and you can just binge through the series. And it's only 8 episodes. The podcast, again, is 36 episodes. Well, it's really 33 in 3 parts. As a tip of the hat to the number of victims. So I would suggest you watch the show and then listen. But the problem you're going to have is you're going to long be done with the show as we have the podcast coming out weekly. At some point, because here, in all honesty, I believed that Peacock typically drops an episode per week. So I was thinking that it was going to be 8 weeks of 1 episode per week. I didn't realize it was binge time. They were going to drop them all at the same time. So maybe we change that up. maybe we up it to 3 weeks. Allison's probably going to kill me. She'll say, no, like she wanted one a week. I'm like, man, that's like, we're talking like 6 months before. I'm like, it's too long. So I'm going to try to convince Allie to allow me to drop 3 per week. Cause I don't want the kind of the buzz that's going on with that thing to fade. I want to strike while the iron's hot, because the main thing, the most important thing to me is to get ears on a podcast, which I think deserve it. In which, I decided not to sell it to Wondery when I had it, or one of the big media companies, which made, for me made sense, because I wanted to have creative control. I didn't want it to be limited to 12 episodes. Like I wanted to have all the control, and I wanted to own it, and I wanted to do it the way that I wanted to do it. It was my father's story, and then my story personally to tell. So exactly, get while the grifting is good. There's no question about that. And, I just and I'm going to remind you again, please, it means so much to Allie and I. If you guys just go into Spotify or Apple, make sure that you follow or subscribe, whichever it is, and then start. Even if you're not going to listen to the episode, just hit play. If you're doing something else, just turn the volume down and let the thing run. Because there's a way to beat the Apple algorithm where our show will chart and they'll see it. It's such an easy thing that you guys can do. It's free. You don't have to spend a dime on it. And obviously it would be wonderful if you give us a 5-star review. But if we get a big enough crush, like real quickly, it'll chart us. And like charting's what I need to get it out to the world. I was really excited to see that a content creator on Insta who's got like a huge following, like 112,000 on Instagram is a lot. She put it on her story. She was listening to the pod. So that was really cool. Like, I just need shit like that happening. It's like, it takes a village. It takes a village. We need you guys. Like I put the thing in the community pages, imploring you, begging you really to do this for us, to please help us. That's a little thing that you can give back to us that will really, really help us. We have 58 going on 59,000 subscribers. I realize only have 317 inexplicably. I get 2,000 for Karen Reed for a case that's fucking over. And I have 317 of my ride or dies in here for
That's
the shit that I know, for the shit that I know best. To me, which is infinitely more interesting. Karen's case is done. Quit fucking like bitching about it. It's like the infighting is so weird. Like I can't even. It's such a weird thing going on over there, and people love it. They love it. Like they love the drama of that. It's not my game. Like I'm never going to be doing that. Like we're never going to cover that shit ever. When Karen goes to civil trial, that's when I'll be talking about Karen Reed again. That's it. And when Aiden goes to trial, if he does, that's when I'll be talking about Aiden. In terms of, like, I just don't get why we have 324 when this thing just hit. Like, I don't know. I'll never figure out people. I'll never figure out what they want to watch, what matters to them. So it's confusing to me, but whatever. So at any rate, you have, again, Gacy's placed under arrest. They have him go back to the house, and they have him start with the confessions. All right. And the confessions are a real sticking point for me on how they go down, because Sam's not there. They know he's represented by counsel. Sam's not there. By the time he starts giving his second and third statements, Sam's there. But the first thing that he does, which they don't really show, like where they show it happening is completely different than reality. And I go through the confessions, all of them, at length in the podcast, and I've got them. I've got what version of them exist, which was which was Mike Albrecht was the one who was doing the interrogating when Gacy gives his first statement, when he's admittedly on 130 milligrams of Valium. The guy was popping Valium like it was candy. So he's out of his fucking mind on Valium. And he's just, and then you'll hear it when I interview Mike Albrecht, when he's talking, he's like, I didn't even have to ask Gacy questions. He just started talking. So, but what happens in that is that it's not recorded. It's not written down. There's no written statement. There's no recording of it. It is literally Mike Albrecht going from memory and whatever notes he scribbled down, writing out what Gacy allegedly confessed to. So it's which of course my dad, like in his first scene, and it's a little bit of a spoiler, my dad's like, he's like, wait, it's like, are you saying that there's no recording and there's no written statement? My dad gives him the look, and then said dawns on Sam. Sam's like, oh, then there's no confession. No, it's not on Amazon. It's on NBC. It's on NBC. Peacock. That's where it is. And so basically that's the end of episode 1. All right. And so like they kind of speed, like I said, they speed through the investigation. They get him under arrest. It's really well done. It really is. The show is really well done. It's a slow burn. Like if you're looking for like a gory, like murder-filled pot or series where you're going to see this ain't it. Like, and they did that purposefully. They did it with tact, with grace, with ethics, with consideration of the victims' families that are still alive, the sisters, whatever scene. Like, I don't think any of the parents, maybe, but if they're still alive, they're very old. You've got family out there of these victims that are still out there, and their feelings have to be considered. And they did an excellent job. So I highly recommend it. I do. Britt, Peacock. Like, look, I was very critical of Berlinger's thing for many reasons. Mainly because of what I ended up uncovering, and he just chose to ignore it. And he's a documentarian. So I was super salty about that. This, for what it was and for what they were trying to accomplish and trying to get the story out in a different light than it's ever been done, which is probably the closest thing to my podcast in terms of how the story is told. But it's different enough to where if I ever get something going with the streamer, my story is ripe. Because my story is really about the investigation, the arrest, and the trial. So there it is. Like, that is my, like, I give a high recommend on watching it. I give a bigger recommend on listening to the podcast. I suggest you watch the show first. Go back and listen to the episodes as they come out. If you watch it and it takes a few days because it's about 8 hours. So, most people aren't psychotic like Allison and I. And, I probably watched 6 of them last night. I actually have the last 2 that I have to watch. But I got through a bulk of the series last night, and I highly recommend it. But I do suggest you watch the series first, and then even when you start listening to the first episode, you're gonna be like, oh shit. Because if you get through the first 9 episodes of the podcast in the next like 3 weeks, you're going to see the massive difference in terms of what's reality, what's the true story of this investigation, the story that no one's ever told because no one knew that it existed aside from one guy, and that's Lieutenant Kozenzak, and probably his right-hand man, Ron Adams, who are both dead. So the true story of how they got Gacy, which is so good, which is like in terms of like when we break it, like, because you're hearing us do it in real time. And it was so hard for me to wrap my mind around how we handle disclosing it because of who Gacy turned out to be, which is this monster. But what they did to get him, you know, so all right, I've gone on too long. I'm giving high regard to the show. Watch it, start streaming it tonight. If you don't have Peacock, that's a shame. Maybe you can get a week free just to binge it. I don't know, but it's worth it. It's if you're into the Gacy case, it's a good watch. And if for nothing else, to watch Michael Chernus's depiction of John Wayne Gacy, it is one for the ages. I mean, I messaged him. I'm like, dude, it's an Emmy worthy performance, because what I said to him exactly is this. I'm going to read it to you, because I was watching it and Allie fell asleep next to me last night. It was very, very late, very early, early morning. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell? What is this? Okay. All right. Bear with me. Okay. So I'm like, I messaged Michael. I'm like, Michael, we binged the series and your performance was absolutely spectacular. That thing that happens when an actor is performing a biographical role and so embodies that person that you forget completely that you were watching an actor, that happened. And then, you know, I'm like, well done, Michael, Emmy time. But he really, like, you forget that you're like, you know, and I asked my dad, I'm like, you know, because there's been a few movies and a few different guys that played Gacy. I think they had, I can't remember who the last one was. I want to say it was one of the Quaid brothers, maybe. I can't remember exactly. And then the one time they had it's got a big, like, round head. I can't remember. Whatever. None of the other guys that have ever been in any other Gacy movies ever even came close to what Gacy was. They didn't embody him. Michael Chernus knocked it out of the park. Like, for that alone. And again, they avoid graphic violence by, you know, there's a couple of scenes where they do an amazing job just to show the terror that it must have been for these kids. But yeah, no, it's worth watching it just for his performance. And really everybody in the show was great. So, all right, y'all, that's going to do it for Felonious Friday special edition. Highly recommend watching that. But please, I'm begging you again. And this is even a grift because I'm not asking for anything other than your 2 minutes of your time to go to wherever you listen to your pods, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Allison got on like every podcatcher has the pod on there. Please go on there. Remember, it's on its own feed. It's not on Defense Diaries. It is buried. Okay. And it is here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do you one better. I'm just going to put it up there. I'm going to show you all what's up. Let me pop this over. And on a computer, it's tougher, but on the phone, it's really easy to follow. They have the follow button like right there for you. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Let me see if I can find you guys. I have so many tabs open on the Chrome. That's why it always takes me forever to find you guys. Once I leave it, it's like, it's like 20 clicks. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is it. This is it. All right. So this is on Apple Pods. Okay. This is what it looks like. And I'm obviously on my Mac. So you can see the art there. Only one episode's out. We're going to be dropping the next quickly. But please go in and just give us a 5-star on there if you think it's worthy. But we hope that you do. So before you follow the show, see, I've followed it. So if you're on your computer, it's going to be right over here. And on Spotify, it's much of the same. But if you give us a review, if you have the time to give us a written review, that would even be better. But frankly, I prefer people to listen to it and give us genuine reviews, because then it comes from the heart. And and plus I really like hearing from people that listen to it, and hearing how they felt about it. So and what they thought of it. It's important to me. It matters to me. It really does. So, all right. So everybody go and do that. Buried inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation right now, because it's a brand new one. It's let's see, it's brand spanking. It is it's not going to pop up when you just put buried in. So you might have to type in buried and then inside the John Wayne Gacy investigation before it to pop up. Hopefully, as soon as we get more followers on it and more listens, it'll auto populate as soon as you write buried in. That shouldn't take too long, but in the interim, you might have to do a little searching for it. So, all right, let me go through these. I had a couple of questions and a couple of supers. So Stacy Q said, Bob, did you or your father ever believe, this is the accomplice question I saw, that he had accomplices, or the boys that lived with him dug the spaces or the trenches, etc., knew more than they said? I know Gacy later said he had help, but he is such a liar. Yes. Yes, I did. Yes, I know I said this early in the live. Yes, I absolutely think that Cram and Rossi had a hand. I get into it in depth in the podcast. I look at a lot of different things. We desperately tried to get Michael Rossi to come on the podcast. He told me he wanted 50 grand. I'm like, are you going to fucking lie to me? I'm like, I'm not paying you 50 grand to come in and deny some shit. I'm like, you lived with him during his most active killing period. How didn't you know? Like, another thing that the show completely ignores, which I'm not going to tell you, will blow your mind, about John Zick and his vehicle. And then Travis had asked, Defense Diaries, at some point, can you explain the beginning of the Netflix John Wayne Gacy tapes? Pretty sure different tapes, but it said someone from the original legal team reached out and said, Travis, I missed what the second part of it is. But so, yeah. No, not our tapes. And that's a flat out lie. There's only one set of tapes. When you hear a woman on those tapes, which you hear, it is Karen Conti, and she, along with my old law school professor, were Gacy's last two appellate attorneys. So those are clearly Karen Conti, and this is in 92, 93, up to 94, right when Gacy gets executed. So definitely not our tapes. No one else has my tapes. I have the only tapes from the trial. Sam Amaranti allegedly had some, but lost them. So I don't know, but those weren't them. Like, nobody that you're hearing. Like, the only people you would hear for the original legal team would be my dad or Sam. That's it. There was nobody else. So yeah, no, it was like, that was one of the things that, one of the reasons that I was a little disappointed with Berlinger's thing. Thanks for the question though, Travis. We love you, brother. History and Homicide, best of luck on the rebranded pod. Thank you. Literally amazing work, Bob. Huge respect. Thank you, History and Homicide, and thank you for your generosity. I really, really appreciate it so much. And then Britt, put my pops on to the new remastered pod. Awesome. I love that. Thank you. I love, please, Britt, come back and let me know what he thinks. It's like, when I talk to people that were kind of alive when this was during their like heyday, like they're in their 20s or 30s when this shit broke, or even if they were kids and they just heard about it, I love hearing from them. So please, if your dad enjoys it, please let me know how he feels, and maybe even like get him to come on live and come into chat. That would be amazing. I'd love that. So thank you for doing that so much, Britt. It means a lot. I wish you guys would all do it. Like, I wish you'd all turn your people onto it. Like, we expect you to. I'm going to have a contest. I was telling Allie, I'm going to do a contest for a free sweatshirt giveaway, and I'm going to put it on you you're going to have to take screen grabs. People that are willing to tell the most people in their family and friend group to subscribe to the show who can give me screenshot proof that those people actually subscribed or followed the show, I'm going to have a contest where that person's going to win a sweatshirt of their choice from the show. So, or from our bonfire shop. So I haven't started that yet, but I'm going to do it in the next couple of days because I got to do like super grifting. I have to do grassroots grifting. So, but we really do need y'all. We really do need y'all. So thank you so much for your generosity, Britt. I really appreciate it. And more importantly, thank you for putting your dad on it. Kelly K, I was waiting for a close-up of the muddy boots. I even told my husband to wait for it, and it never happened. So true, right? Disappointing. Like Allie said that. She's like, I'm really surprised that they didn't take the 30 seconds to have that scene where Gacy comes in with the muddy shoe and the muddy pants, like the night before. It's like, it's weird. That was a weird editorial choice. But again, they only have so much that they can cram in, So, I mean, I get it. I probably would have made a different choice from a editor's perspective, but like you'll probably listen to the podcast and be like, oh, you probably don't need to talk about the handheld football game as much as you do. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Like that, these guys telling me the story of that old Mattel handheld football game that they would play for hours while killing time while sitting on Gacy's house. I fucking loved it. It was so real and humanized, like what these dudes were going through, sitting on 12-hour shifts outside of this dude's house. I loved it. I thought it was an amazing part of the story. So, and then thank you so much, Kelly K. And then Brian, member for 17 months, an OG, unequivocally. You can also search Modified Sound LLC. Yes, you can. Excellent. Thank you for making that point, Brian. I really appreciate that. I think, Brian, you were telling me the one you were having I know Megan Spitfire had a hard time finding it, and she was telling me, and I did too. When I went to look for it on my Mac, I had to put in the whole thing because Allie was right. She's like, oh, it popped up. I'm like, oh, maybe we got enough files so that it's auto-populating as soon as you put buried in. But she's right. I think that the phone, once you found it, it had just trained to when you go back to it, it'll just pop in. So, because when I went to my Apple Pods, I had to put the whole thing in. So, all right, y'all. I've taken enough of your Friday night. I love all of you. You're all just wonderful, beautiful, beautiful humans who we just appreciate so much. Like I can never state enough how much we love our community. You guys mean everything to us. Mandy, thank you so much for getting what I needed you to get done, and with no notice. As you said, I did have all day. I absolutely had all day. I should have thrown it out there. I was scatterbrained as a mofo today. And, I, of course, gave Mandy no time to get the thumb together. And, of course, per usual, she fucking crushed it. And, Tracy, thank you for everything you do every single day. And to all of our mods, we just love you to death. We love you to death. We could not have this community without you guys. I hope that you know that in your hearts all the way, because it's so true. You guys are the backbone, the heart and soul of this community. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And so does Allie. I know she does. She'd be saying the same thing if she was here. So thank you, mods. And thank you guys, our community, our beautiful people, our beautiful humans. We just love you so much. And I want you never to forget, without y'all, I'm just an old man talking about the Gacy case. Talk at you next time. Have a great weekend, y'all. Love ya.